Welcome to Life Journey in Ministry, Part 2, 1960 through 2008, the story of training and ministry inside the U.S. When I graduated from high school in May 1960, my decision was to attend East Texas Baptist College in Marshall, Texas, after turning down a basketball scholarship at a Baptist junior college closer to home. During my junior year of high school, I had made a commitment to Christian ministry. At that point, I was moving toward appointment to the new Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, with the ambition to subsequently do a degree in aerodynamical engineering at MIT in Massachusetts. But the Lord had other plans. A cousin in Perrin would realize the academy appointment instead of me. How different my life would have been had the goal to design and fly airplanes been realized. The legendary test pilot Chuck Yeager was the model that I wanted to follow. But the larger need to follow Jesus' leadership took top priority. In 1960, my thinking was that I would get the needed training and then pastor churches over the rest of my life. Little did I understand how God's will would evolve for me. Marshall proved to be more disappointing than positive for me. The Baptist school was okay, but the segregated Old South atmosphere of Marshall at the beginning of the Civil Rights Movement, and the hugely tall pine trees that blocked most of the sunshine reaching the ground were more than I could accept. My parents had raised me to respect all people of all races. The rule that East Texas Baptist College students were not to have any contact with Afro-American students in the very close by Bishop's College was just too much. I encountered serious religious hypocrisy even among ministerial students for the first time. So, along with a significant number of other first-year students, I transferred out at the end of that freshman year. My most favorite memory of that year was learning how to preach by giving a sermon every Sunday night to a group of Afro-American ladies at the nearby TB Sanatorium in Shreveport, Louisiana. Those precious ladies gave incredible encouragement to their young white preacher boy who came over every Sunday evening. Another memorable event came during the Christmas holidays. Two college friends from the San Blas Indians in Panama spent the holidays with me back at Perrin. Not only were they warmly welcomed by my parents, but the Baptist Church through the WMU embraced them enthusiastically and began a ministry to Manuel's father, a native pastor on the San Blas Islands. Thankfully, the school is not like it was today in the 1960s. The fall of 1961 was particularly eventful with the transfer to Wayland Baptist College in Plainview. I moved from the deep piney woods of East Texas to the utterly flat and treeless South Plains of the Texas Panhandle at Plainview. But it proved to be the best move for me. The university had desegregated itself in 1949 at its own initiative, and by 1961 it had a large number of Afro-American and Hispanic students among its student body. It was a wonderfully refreshing atmosphere where the color of one's skin was not relevant. Part-time jobs became necessary as a part of the financing of my education. in addition to the ministerial and academic scholarships that paid most of the bill. The first year meant, after working in the school bookstore for a semester, working as a janitor's assistant at a nearby elementary school, cleaning up the daily messes of children each afternoon from 3 to 6 o'clock. Nothing is more humbling than this kind of work. After the first year, I moved on to work as a stock boy for West Pharmacy on the town square in downtown Plainview for the remaining 2 years before graduation. The pay was better and the work not quite as distasteful. The religion department became home for me. Dr. Howard and Dr. Bishop especially became mentors who taught me well in Greek, Bible, and religious studies. Other professors also were important influences. Dr. Neff instilled a love of English grammar, Dr. Dawson of history, and other teachers as well. I enjoyed participating in a speech choir that taught me to articulate pronunciation of words. Getting to present a major senior paper at the National History Honor Society meeting at the University of New Mexico was a high point. And then to the Wayland student body in chapel sometime afterwards. I did manage to play basketball on the junior varsity team until the need for a paying job took priority over sports. Serving as president of the Student Ministerial Association was helpful and opened the door to preach in numerous churches in the region. I managed to avoid getting caught up in some of the heretical teachings that were promoted by the University BSU director at that time. But I learned much through this experience. Through all of these experiences, the Lord was molding and shaping me for ministry, both then and for the future. In June of 1964, Mr. West arranged for me a job interview with a huge medical distribution company in Fort Worth. Soon after graduation, we moved from Plainview to begin seminary studies in Fort Worth, already with a job lined up. The move to Fort Worth provided the first real dilemma in ministry to me. I began preaching in area churches with some regularity that summer. In late summer, a small church near where I'd grown up asked me to come as their pastor, but I didn't sense the leadership of God in this, so I reluctantly said no. Then in late September, the pastor search committee from the Baptist Church in Grayford invited me to come in view of a call. This time a green light came from the Lord, and so in the middle of the first semester, another move from Fort Worth to Grayford had to be made. This was a church of about 75 people, and the pastor lived on the field. This began a 4-day-a-week, 150-mile round trip each day commute to the seminary. One of the very interesting aspects was that Grayford had been our bitterest rival during my school days at Perrin in the 1950s. Now I was to be pastor of a few of my high school basketball rivals at Grayford. We had lots of interesting conversations over the next 4 years while I was their pastor. The church had a reputation for being hard on pastors, and I well remember the previous pastor telling me soon after coming to the church, "Warren, if you can pastor this bunch of people, there's not a church in Texas that you can't handle." I learned the truth of his words over the subsequent years. But because I grew up in a very small, similar atmosphere at Perrin, I understood the people, while many of their city boy pastors previously had no clue on how to relate. The next spring, when one of the farmers in the community suddenly died, I volunteered to do the cotton planting of the several hundred acres that he'd already contracted out for. Little did I realize what an impact this would have across the community, that this young Baptist preacher is out there running this huge tractor planting cotton for Mrs. Garvin, the widow lady. One of the great challenges was being friend and pastor to a young Green Beret soldier in the church who had a medical discharge after being severely wounded several times in combat in Vietnam. Joe and I spent many hours sitting on the shores of Possum Kingdom Lake in a remote spot where he could flush out all of the hurt, the anger, and so forth out of his system from suffering through literally hell in Vietnam. I began stopping often in some of the beer joints in Dark Valley west of Grateford in order to minister to many who wouldn't darken the door of a church. I ended up baptizing a number of them in their conversion to Christ and did the funeral of lots of these folk. Simple acts of kindness and compassion did much to open doors of witness and ministry. God was really working. During the 4 years at Grayford, I also completed the Master of Divinity degree at Southwestern Baptist Seminary in Fort Worth. A number of academic events significantly shaped the future for me. At the beginning of the second semester, I was asked to become a grader and teaching assistant for Dr. Tom Murray in the New Testament department. This was something ordinarily reserved only for doctoral students, and thus I felt very honored to be asked to do this in my second semester of my master's studies. In the following fall, I switched over to work for Dr. Jack McGorman, something that lasted from 1965 through 1973. My first experience of teaching a seminary master's class was the product of this, along with a very deep personal friendship with members of the New Testament department. With lots of hard work and perseverance, I managed to do the master's degree with close to a 4.0 GPA, while serving as assistant at the seminary and pastoring the church at Grayford. With graduation looming in the winter of 1967, there also came keen interest in foreign mission service in Brazil. But the direction this seemed to be taking was theological education by extension, or TEE, and this required a doctor's degree. I managed to qualify and gain acceptance as a doctoral student through the rigorous testing process at the seminary. But I wasn't sure that 4 or 5 more years of commuting from Grayford was possible. So in June of 1968, Springdale Baptist Church in the Riverside area of Fort Worth called me as senior pastor. I went from preaching to around 75 people each Sunday to a congregation of around 250 each Sunday. There was a church staff of 4 or 5 people to lead in an urban setting in Fort Worth. The next 6 years of leading this congregation became some of the happiest and most rewarding times of ministry ever. We managed to grow to a massive building program, help another church merge into ours, and experience one of the most phenomenal spiritual awakenings I've ever observed. All this while Margaret and Ruth, secretaries at the church, helped me manage doctoral studies, teaching assistant work, and pastoring. We had a wonderful ministry staff's support. We had wonderful ministry staff support, as well as for youth, music, and educational needs. In January of 1974, a call came from the dean of the theology school at Southwestern offering me a teaching position on the faculty. Hesitatingly, I accepted and began that fall. Over the next 24 years, I was professor of Greek and New Testament, gradually shifting my teaching to the PhD program from the master's. 2-year-long sabbatic leaves at major universities in Germany provided me lectureship opportunities to teach in German at Bonn and Heidelberg. Also, preaching in several German Baptist churches came along. Such things I never ever imagined could have happened. Within a short time after my going to the seminary as a professor, the Southern Baptist controversy erupted full force. The entire seminary came under attack from the right-wing religious fundamentalists. The 80s and 90s were consumed with trying to fight off this religious cancer. My generation of faculty took a leading role in this fight at the seminary, since most of the older generation could not believe that such people could ever take control of the seminary. The 2 years that I was on sabbatical leave at the University of Bonn in 82-83 and the University of Heidelberg in 90-91 were welcomed reprieves from the horrific tension and pressure at the seminary. In Germany, I was treated with respect and esteem by Lutheran and Reformed Church professor colleagues, as I had never experienced in the U.S. Because I paid the linguistic price of learning German well enough to give lectures to doctoral students, not only did I gain acceptance as a very atypical American, but the University of Bonn even offered me a lectureship on their faculty. Again, it was not God's timing, which I sorely regretted. In 1994, Dr. Dilday, the seminary president, was fired by the fundamentalist-controlled trustee board. The days were numbered for those of us who stood up to the corruption of the gospel by these people. In June of 1997, a memo crossed my desk that a Baptist school in North Carolina was looking for an entry-level New Testament professor. I was far from that, but I felt moved to contact the chair of the religion department about the opening. Much to my surprise, the school enthusiastically wanted Claire and I to come out for an interview. So in July, we flew to North Carolina, and I was interviewed for the position as a full professor of New Testament and Greek at Gardner-Webb University. In October, I accepted their offer to begin in January 1998. We packed our belongings in mid-December and moved to Boiling Springs, North Carolina, a town of around 3,000 people at that time, plus nearly 4,000 university students. January 1998 through December 2008 proved to be a wonderful life experience for both Claire and me. She landed a teaching position in a nearby town and completed a Master of Library Science degree as well. Although many adjustments came about in shifting from teaching PhD students to undergraduate students, I had freedom to develop an extensive program of biblical Greek studies and was privileged to help develop a master's program in the religion department. I helped GWU develop its online teaching program, and Cranfordville.com, my website, was born in 1999. The beauty of the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains was overwhelming, and we both fell in love with the mountains. And for most of that 11 years, I taught an older men's Sunday school class at First Baptist Church, Shelby, North Carolina. Friendships were made that continue still to today. Once we settled into life in small-town USA, we began exploring the region with all its scenic beauty. At Christmas of 1999, Claire received her first Sony A model digital camera. Developing skills in landscape photography became her passion. We have an archive file of over 15,000 photos of the Blue Ridge Mountains. Gradually, new and better cameras were added, and we began doing photo sessions at weddings, important meetings, so forth. She was the photographer, and I did the technical side of editing and organizing the photos for clients. For the first few years, Claire's schedule was very hectic, with settling into teaching responsibilities and then shifting over to school librarian. This mandated a master's degree in North Carolina school regulations. So she worked on a Master of Library Science degree at East Carolina State University, doing it online. Both daughters decided to move to North Carolina, and that brought some of the family close by, in that they settled in the Asheville area, some 70 miles west of Boiling Springs. One of our sons lived in the Washington, D.C. area, which was about 5 hours away from us. So we enjoyed family get-togethers reasonably often, especially at holidays. Cliffside Elementary School, where Claire taught, was situated in an old textile mill town with a dying mill industry having been located there. Had it been a large city, the school would have been an inner city type school. A large section of the 300 to 400 school kids came out of poverty and thus suffered all kinds of issues. After becoming the librarian, Claire got to know all of the kids and became very quickly greatly loved and respected in the school. Although very demanding, her work there was her ministry and mission to help these kids aspire to something greater than their present, often troubled existence. We could hardly go shopping in the region without youngsters coming up to her for a hug and proudly wanting to introduce their teacher to their parents. For a long time, it seemed as though this would be our retirement home. We had bought a new home in Boiling Springs with this objective in mind. But as the years of the new century began unfolding, the work atmosphere in the North Carolina public schools began deteriorating rapidly, with a determined effort to dismantle public schools by certain politicians in the state. By 2007, we were beginning to think seriously about retirement. The year 2008 was a huge transitional moment for Claire and I in ministry. We shifted from serving God in the United States to serving God overseas, first in Europe and then in Costa Rica.